Hey, what's going on, guys? It's David. I'm back. I'm coming at you today with something a little tricky, particularly if you're just beginning programming, but it's only going to get easier if you do it a lot. And that's something called recursion. If you don't know what recursion is, that's this idea of the repeated application of a recursive procedure or definition. Just the fact that it has like a name of itself, recursive, inside its own definition, kind of tells you that this is, something a little bit trickier than normal. So over here, it kind of tells you that such problems can generally be solved by iteration. So basically, recursion is this ability that if we have a task and we have a smaller task of that has to be done over and over and over again with a base case. And the base case is when it stops, that we can turn it into a recursive function. So an example with this would be if we wanted to make a function that counted down from whatever number I passed in to 0 and then printed that. We could do that using just a while loop. So if I said while, if I pass in a number, and I just make a while loop. So while that number is greater than or equal to 0, I want to print. And then I want to subtract. So this number, if I pass in a 5, first time through it's going to print out 5, then subtract, then 4, etc., until it reaches 0. And then it's going to print 0. When it subtracts, it's going to be -1. So that's outside of the case of the while loop, and the program's going to finish. Let's check that. %d. Oh, I never told it what to print. Let's try that again. Five, four, three, two, one. Cool, exactly what we expected. So let's do this. We just did it through an iterative approach. Let's do it through a recursive approach. So for this, I am going to do, I'm going to send this to a function. So I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to say count down to 0. I'm going to pass in that number. Because this is a function in C, I either have to make a function prototype or I have to put that function before main. I'm going to make a prototype just because it's maybe a little bit cleaner. I actually don't need this to return anything. So this function is going to take in a number, an integer, as we can see here. And then here, when I do that method, in the prototype, I called it a number. So I'm going to keep that up. Actually, I'm going to call it num, just to kind of show off that because this is in a different scope, we can change the name of it. So here, instead of doing that while loop, which would work, I'm instead going to do a recursive function. So first up, if I were you, I would set a base case. Anytime you make a recursive function, it's always best to first start with that base case. So my base case earlier in the while loop was if the number is less than 0, I don't want to print anything and I want to stop. So I'm just going to say that. I'm going to say if number is less than 0, just return. Hard stop, don't do anything with it. Else, I want to print out that number and say counting down from the number. And then I want to call the same function again, just with 1 minus that number. Or that number minus 1. So this time, when I pass in a 5, it's greater than 0, so it's not going to, this if statement's not going to fire. Instead, it's going to print that 5, and then call this function again with a 4. And then a 3, etc., until 0. When it's going to print that, subtract a 1 from it, it's going to be -1. So then this base case will fire, and it'll just return, and it'll be done. So let's remake this. There it is. So we just took a simple task, counting down from a number by ones until 0. We did it through an iterative fashion, which was the while loop. While this number is greater than or equal to 0, print it out, and then subtract a number. And then we turned it into a recursive function, where we made its own function, and we first set a base case, saying, if this is below 0, just return. Else, print that number, and then call the same function again with that number minus 1. So that's just an example of recursion. There's lots of examples out there, and I'm hoping to hopefully cover some more in the future. But that's it for today. Have a great time. Let me know if you have any issues. Until next time, have a good one.